Okay, it's 4 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And would somebody like to move adoption of the minutes?
So moved.
Moved and second. All those in favor? Contrary, carried. Next committee, November the 23rd. And first item on the agenda, the Steveston Heritage Interpretive Framework. And that would be Rebecca.
Hello, everyone. I have a brief presentation on the interpretive framework before we begin, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the report.
Okay, let's see your presentation. There's a very good report, and I expect your presentation will be equally good.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Yep. So I'd just like to introduce the draft Steveston Heritage Interpretive Framework for you to give you an overview of what we're presenting, and you'll find a more detailed version of this included as an attachment in your report. So first of all, what is an interpretive framework? Well, it sets out the main themes and stories that are told at heritage places. And these themes guide the design and operation of our heritage facilities, including everything from conservation to landscaping, exhibits, and programs. And the idea here wasn't to reinvent the wheel and create a very different perspective on what we're doing in heritage, but really to set forth some guidelines in terms of how we're prioritizing all of the work we've got to accomplish and all the opportunities that come our way. So to develop this draft plan, there was a few steps that occurred. First of all, we had some extensive discussions with a number of heritage stakeholders within the Steveston community. It started with a workshop with a broad group of stakeholders and then continued over the past almost 2 years now with our individual heritage site partner groups. We also have incorporated the feedback we've received over the last year and a half through the Phoenix Netloft engagement as well as the Steveston Museum consultation processes. And lastly, a review of all the existing plans and historical documents that have been done regarding Steveston's history, heritage, and the heritage sites that the city owns. So through that process, we identified 3 interpretive themes. And these themes are sort of overarching and woven through all of the stories that we tell and the interpretive activities that take place in Steveston at the heritage sites. And these themes are cultural diversity, connection to the Fraser River, and the past in our present. From these themes, we've also identified 4 particular stories that we would focus on. And you'll notice as we go through these stories that there's alignment with our heritage sites because these stories also reflect the opportunities we have to share that information with the public. And so the first story, not surprisingly maybe, is fishing. And within that story, there's 4 sub-stories. You'll see at the top of the page here. The catch, which is the fish that are fished within the Fraser River and commercially through the Steveston Harbor. Also the fishing techniques and traditions, everything from First Nations to more modern techniques. The third is processing the catch, and with the main focus there being on canneries and the canning process. And the fourth is the fishing fleet, including things like boat building. And you'll see also here listed on each page the locations where these stories can be told, and you'll find that in the report as well. The second story is about farming, and there's 3 sub-stories there. The nature of Steveston's farms, and that's how both farming has built on the natural environment and impacted the natural environment in Steveston. The second is a farming community, so that's the families who have farmed in the Steveston area and the community that was created around the activities of farming. And the third is the business of farming, and that's the economic factor and how people earned a living and how it impacted commercial networks to support the farming industry. The third story is community life. This is quite a rich storyline, and it includes 4 sub-stories. The first of which is building community. And that includes not only the physical infrastructure of the community, but also community organizations, community activities, all of that brings people together and creates a Steveston identity. The second of which is home life, and that ranges from past to present, and the different types of home lives you see based on people's involvement in industries or cultural backgrounds. The third storyline, staying connected, is about communications and the different types of communications that have kept Steveston and the Steveston's people connected to their families, maybe in other places or other communities and other geographical regions. And the last storyline is Nikkei contributions, and the Nikkei community has played a particularly meaningful role in the development of Steveston, and is a quite unique story to not only Richmond, but within Canada, and has a lot to offer. And the last storyline is transportation, and that includes 3 sub-stories. The first being the evolution of transportation, which Steveston has a lot of opportunities to share those stories, both water-based transportation of the early days from the First Nations canoe routes, all the way to more modern transportation modes. And in particular, the second storyline focuses on what we call the Sockeye Special, or the Steveston Tram. And lastly, the idea of transportation as the backbone of commerce, and how Steveston has served as a hub for commercial activity, and the transportation connecting Steveston to other places throughout the world. So through the development of those storylines, a few interpretive gaps were identified, and you'll notice at the end of the report we make a few recommendations. One of those recommendations is specific to these gaps, with the idea that as we identify future opportunities for interpretive initiatives, we should be looking to address these gaps, or maybe weaknesses, areas where we have some interpretation, but given sort of the rich history, there could be more done. So the 6 gaps or weaknesses identified were First Nations and the cultural heritage related to Steveston, the significance of the Fraser River, West Coast fishing methods and boats, how canneries shape the Steveston community, farming and agriculture in Steveston past and present, and Steveston as an international port. And you'll also see outlined at the end of the report some of the activities that we are already doing to work towards addressing some of these gaps. And note that, you know, other future activities will come to Council for approval. I will stop sharing my screen. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Okay, anybody got questions? See if I can get hands up here. Michael.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, just a few comments. Thanks for providing the presentation to enhance the report. That definitely met the goal there. I appreciated the list of the goals, and when I was looking through them, there was one about, this was on our in the package, page 28, under the Steveston Tram goals. And I just know that we host heritage fairs and that kind of thing, but perhaps we try and organize a Steveston Tram fair where schools have science projects where they try and design a tram using the electronic circuitry that grade 9 classes already use. So just a way to perhaps ignite some local interest in getting youth involved in understanding how trams work, and maybe trams in the future, because that seems to be repeating itself in other jurisdictions. My other question was, in your list there on one of the last slides of interpretive gaps, one that raised a concern for me was the value of the Fraser River, and the fact that we haven't felt that we've succeeded with that yet. It's such an important story. So I hope that does get addressed with future staff recommendations and council approvals to get that, because I think it's a significant piece that does need to be further addressed. So thank you.
Hey, Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. Well, this is really an outstanding document. Thank you very much. And I think, as you mentioned, almost 2 years in the making, and I know we've asked about it a couple of times along the way, so I think it was worth the wait. I think really an exceptional document. And really my only question is, what do you consider to be the timeline for the next phase of consultation if this was to pass today and go to council, and then, coming back with some more recommendations? What would that timeline look like?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, I would hope that we would be able to accomplish that within the first quarters of 2022. A lot of that work will be done in conjunction with our partner or our stakeholder organizations. My hope is that I might be able to present to some of their boards, but that will be at their discretion and on their timelines. But I will certainly do my best to reach out and move it forward as quickly as possible.
All right. Thanks very much.
Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Well, the question on the timeline was just asked, but I do want to just make a couple comments because I really, really like the report. And I like the themes, I like the stories, the emphasis on fishing in the river, and I like the moniker, if you will, the past in our present. I think that's smart and clever and catchy and reflective of what we're trying to do too. So, and just the last comment, I just want to compliment you in particular, Rebecca, but other staff too, on the extensive consultation that you've taken with the community. And I know that you got lots of feedback, and you've taken all that information and molded it into something that is a very comprehensive report. And even in terms of the gaps that you identified, I mean, that's very, very thorough as well. So I think it's an excellent report, and I'm just excited to see how we can move forward and make it happen. So in 20 years, it's not a report that we refer to as having been done in the past. You know, it's something that we want to complete, you know, as we go forward. So I'm really excited about that. So thanks.
I'd like to offer my thanks as well, and I'm really excited about it. I think I've waited 20 years for this report, and it's incredible, so it's worth waiting for. I am, as I mentioned to Rebecca and a few others, and to Todd, I'm putting together some materials that we're working on from between 1968 and 1985 that in terms of the river. That's one of the first things we looked at was we called it Parks Afloat, and we were looking at because people growing up in Richmond today don't know there's water around us. They come across the bridge, and we wanted to do something about that. We had trails and boardwalks out into the marshes and the estuarium at Gary Point, things like that. So I'm gathering the papers together. Maybe I'll get it for the November meeting so I can pass it on to staff, because there's a lot of stuff that we did that got lost along the wayside that I think will fill one of those gaps. And so I think we've got a document now that is a basis for moving ahead, and anything that's missing, we can just add to it. I think I just like to say it's an incredible job. Maybe the pandemic helped out to give staff time to do all this work, but it's certainly a good job, well done. So thank you very much to all of you. Any further comments or questions from committee? Okay, would somebody like to move the motion to recommendation? So moved.
Check.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary, carried. Okay, next item, another exciting report, the Steveston Museum and Post Office visitor experience. And Rebecca. Okay.
I have nothing further to add to the report. I'm happy to take questions. We do have, I think, Linda Barnes and Joanne Taraguchi from the Steveston Historical Society here as well.
Okay, let's take questions first, if there are any, and then we'll let Linda make and Joanne make a comments. Any questions from committee? I don't see any hands up. Linda, would you like to say a few words, or Joanne?
Good afternoon, Councillor Steves and committee. Thank you very much. I'm not sure, to be honest, Councillor Steves, if Joanne is going to be able to make it. She is working and was hoping to get off, but Michael's nodding that she might be on here, so that's good to hear. And so we'll basically do a joint presentation, and Joanne can add a few words when I'm done. So again, my name is Linda Barnes, 4551 Gary Street, and I am the co-chairperson of the Steveston Historical Society. And I'll let Joanne introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Joanne Teraguchi, the other co-chair, and thank you for the invitation for the meeting.
So thank you. We'd like to start off by thanking city staff, particularly Rebecca Clark and Tricia Bowman, for their assistance in bringing this forward and with working with us for approximately 2 years. We've been at this quite some time. And so we think that we found a workable, creative, and fiscally responsible resolution for the Steveston Historical Society to meet the expectations of the community and to fulfill the mandate of the Steveston Historical Society, which is to preserve and promote the history of Steveston. With the help of city staff, we were able to canvass the local community with for word of mouth. My computer divided this in half. So with word of mouth to ascertain what they felt was important to them. The staff report highlights the findings, which was the post office ranked extremely high. Community felt gathering place was important. Certainly the history of Steveston, including that of the Postal Service and Communications, the Nikai heritage information, and wayfinding to other historic Steveston sites, along with some original retail, was what sort of the highlights of the survey did, and which really aligns with what the Historical Society had ascertained themselves. So it was nice to see the affirmation of that. The Society is excited to embark on this next phase to serve our community and continue to our work in the Lower Mainland's best community. We cannot do so as referenced in this report without financial support. And so we are also reaching out to other groups to ascertain that we can make this plan a success. And so with that, we're hoping that the city committee will endorse this report and we can move forward with a very exciting future. Joanne, did you want to add any extra words to that?
I don't think so. I think you covered everything, but I do want to thank Rebecca, too, because I know it was a lot of work and it was a lot of meetings. I can't believe it's 2 years. My goodness. Time flies when you're having fun. I'm excited about the promotion of the local artists, if we get the funding for that. I'm excited to see the building become lively, like the way it used to be before pandemic time. But hopefully, City Council will endorse all of this and we can move ahead with it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee? Any comment? Carol?
Thank you very much, Councillor Steves. Really interesting report. When I was reading through, there was a mention of $354,000, a one-time cost to implement design and construction. I'm not 100% clear what that money is for. Can someone explain that to me?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, there's, I think, 4 bullet points that kind of outline at high level what those costs are for. Yes. Primarily fitting out the space, partly to readjust with the vacancy left by Tourism Richmond's Visitor Center, as well as the updating of some of the heritage displays, including a new digital display, which would offer opportunities to tell additional stories that can't be told in the small footprint that the Steveston Museum offers. And then lastly, some elements to bring to the fore and make more, raise the profile of the Japanese Fishermen's Benevolent Society building. So those sort of capture the three main buckets, and I'm happy to provide further detail on costing if necessary.
So then on page 34, it says explore potential for additional retail services, including possible offerings, operational costs, and potential revenues. So would that $354,000 include creating, additional retail space areas?
So through the chair to Councillor Day, part of what the Steveston Historical Society is proposing is a pop-up artist shop that would offer retail for local artists. And my understanding is that could be done on sort of a consignment kind of basis. So this funding would provide the infrastructure to allow that pop-up shop to take place.
Okay, so we're not talking a gap is going in there. We're just talking things that would benefit local artists and local, interests, basically.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, exactly, and that's what we heard from community, that there was an appetite for.
Okay, well, we've seen a lot of success through the store at the Gulf of Georgia Cannery, so I think that's a brilliant idea to follow that kind of model. Thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be supporting this 100%. Too bad this didn't come through sooner. In my opinion, I think this is an investment that we have to make, and I have no problem with any of it. I just put out a couple of comments if I can. I'm glad to see, when you try to preserve history, you can preserve it or you can have it move along and still remember the history as you move forward. And I think the opportunity for multi-use here is good. I wouldn't want to put too much in it. I don't think you have to justify yourself, to be quite frank with you. I think there's something that heritage conservation costs. The bank and the museum means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think that's an opportunity. I don't see us losing anything in terms of the role of the bank, where the bank came, and the museum. I think what we have can augment and be augmented. So I am not hung up on the financial. I think we should put it forward as it is with the financial recommendation on page 236. And if we should happen, the society and others, and we as a city, to get some windfalls and some other ideas, we can entertain them and see. But I think it's money worth well spending. I think it'll get a lot more people in there. I think people don't even realize, and I can guarantee you, present companies don't know the role of the bank from W.H. Steves on to Mr. Charlton to the Japanese in the community, and don't know the role of the, as you and I, Harold, fought for the Steveston Museum. If we didn't fight for it, we wouldn't have got it. You remember where it was sitting, over on number 1 road in the bushes. So anyhow, I'm supporting this 100%.
Okay, Linda, and then Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you to staff and to the stakeholders who are here with us today. An excellent report, and a lot of it makes sense to me. And as Councillor McNulty said, I see this as a really good investment in our city and in Steveston, and I really applaud you for that. Having space for local artists and artisans to demonstrate or exhibit. I know I've had relatives here from out of town, and one thing they always ask, and they're really hard to find, is like Steveston specific like postcards or memorabilia about that. And so you can find Vancouver, you can find Richmond, but really hard to find Steveston specific. So I hope that'll be included in there somewhere. And I think it really aligns with a lot of our goals about promoting local artists and their craft. So thanks very much.
Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Well, I hope the committee, sounds like the committee is supporting it. and I will eventually, if they do. I just think the Steveston Museum is an integral part to the whole community, as has been said, and I think that it is time to, reimagine it and reinvigorate it to an extent, and I think this plan does that. I think the post office has been a challenge over the years, as has the relationship with Tourism Richmond, all for, understandable reasons, I think. So I think this plan addresses some of the challenges you've been facing. The post office itself, I think, is a good fit for the building and a good fit for the community, and a lot of people support having it there as far as that aspect of the report goes. So I think repurposing some of the space that's being vacated by tourism for artists and other purposes that are outlined, I think is a good idea. I think that also is a fit with the community overall. With the Japanese Fishermen's Benevolent Society, I think the challenge there is, and this report moves towards addressing that challenge, and I think Councillor McNulty kind of mentioned it, it's under-recognized and underused, partly I think because of the layout and things that are hard to control, but I think with the pop-ups and different things that this report can help address, it'll draw more people into that part of the site, and I think that's really important in terms of our history and everything else. So I think that all in all, this will enhance Steveston, enhance the historical sites, and it will actually help draw more people, not just visitors, but residents as well, down to that location. And I think that's all very good. And there is a price tag to be attached to these things. And if we want to have a livable, rich, diverse, historically significant part of Steveston as well, then there will be a price to it. And I think it's a reasonable price. So thank you.
Okay, that's most of the committee. I have some comments. First, I've got a question. When I made the referral recently on some of this stuff, everything's covered except one item, and that was I was suggesting that the postal employees should have a living wage. And I'm wondering, is this enough money to give them a living wage? I don't know who can answer that, because that certainly would be an objective that we need to accomplish.
To the chair, I believe Linda was putting her hand up to respond to that.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Councillor Steves. Depends on what you call a living wage. Our staff we try to consistently keep them above minimum wage. But to be quite frank, this does not put them with what my understanding a living wage requires for the Lower Mainland is. I think it's just under $20 an hour, right. And know that this at this point this will not put them to that level, but it keeps them above minimum wage.
So that's something we have to work on then. Okay, that was my only question. I just want to comment on the overall concept. I think it's when we first acquired the building. We had a neighbor, a committee in Steveston went door to door to every house in Steveston. They said, "What do you want?" And they said two things: we want our post office back and a museum. And it had nothing to do with the bank. We didn't even own the bank building. And as a result of that, we got a neighborhood improvement program from the provincial and federal governments, and we acquired the bank building. We set it up with a doctor's office, the doctor's living room at the back, and doctor's bedrooms upstairs, and very little, other than one room that we had, basically a children's museum, nothing ever changed. And I like the idea now of actually the bank manager vacating his office, because it's always been the same, and utilizing it for the artists. I think it'll be a lot more vibrant with some activities going on, because simply having it as a static display, the whole building basically static, it really doesn't do it. So I'm hoping that this will make it more vibrant. I do want to raise one item, however, that I would like to suggest be considered. This building itself is unique, and I'm not sure if it's in any of the reports, but it came from the British Columbia, BC Mills that ran Hastings Mills in Vancouver, and this is a catalog from 1904. And this is basically roughly the building that they built there. So they called it a pre-built building. They built it on site, either at Hastings Mills or in New Westminster, then tore it down and reassembled it. I don't know if there's any left in BC other than this one. It'd be nice. It'd be interesting to know. There was about 100 banks that were built to this plan in British Columbia, and I think they're all gone. So it's a unique building, and I'll loan my catalog to staff, and they can research it. But I think it's another story that we can tell about that building, because what's interesting, I was going through this catalog last night, and what's interesting about it, something that's in these days is tiny houses. Their first section is all tiny houses, all prefabbed, and it's just exactly what young people are talking about today. So what goes around comes around, and I think that building maybe is from 1905 is now a vision of the future for some of the construction as well, because it certainly it isn't the mansion; it's the smaller house that a lot of young people want. So that said, and I think that a more vibrant museum. Oh, one other thing I wanted to comment on: when we moved the Japanese Benevolent Society building to the site, we joined the two buildings together. And staff said, well, we'll have the museum people in front oversee the people going in and out. And then when we opened it up, we had an attendant in the back. And in this discussion with staff, if we are able to increase the salary of the people in front and make them a little more responsible, they can keep an eye on the people going in and out in the off months in the winter, and then we'd have auxiliaries there in the summertime. So it's something we should be able to work out if the Benevolent Society building becomes more vibrant as well. So I think we're on our way, and we can build on it, and it's another great report. So any further comments from everybody? Someone would like to move adoption? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. And thanks to Linda and Joanne for joining us. Okay. Let's see what's next items on here. Okay, recreation and sports strategy. Boy, the reports we've got today, wow.
Hi, everyone. My name is Donna Lee.
Donna Lee, yeah.
Yes. So I have nothing further to add to the report, but I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, Michael.
Thank you to the chair, to staff. A couple of real short questions, and then some comments, and then questions about another focus area. So in the agenda, the second item on the last part of it, the last line mentions that this will be circulated to community recreation associations and societies and Richmond Sports Council and Aquatic Advisory Board. So two quick questions about that. Is the Richmond Arenas Committee part of the Richmond Recreational Associations and Societies? Does it fit in there?
Yes,
okay.
It does.
Okay, thanks. Through the chair to staff, the next question relates to something from our minutes from last meeting. So Councillor McNulty added an item. It's in our package here, page 8. And I kind of naively supported it then, and maybe this is the time to get a little more clarification on it. So it was referred and moved and seconded and carried that East Richmond and Hamilton be included as potential sites for sport amenities in the Sports Council Facility Priorities Task Force. This is at the top of page 8 in our package in the minutes section. And so my question is that task force part of Richmond Sports Council? And could we get, it doesn't have to be right now, but if that is the case, could we get a makeup of the task force, or hear about some of the what they've been working on? I know I'm assuming one counselor is the liaison for the committee, but yeah, I'm not sure if there could be a highlight sheet or yeah. Could you clarify that? Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'll pass it over to Greg Wheeler to respond to that.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, the Richmond Sports Council is represented on that committee, and we can follow up with further information on the status of that committee and where they're at.
Thank you. Through the chair to follow up on that one. So the Richmond Sports Council is just one part of that task force. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, to Councillor Wolf. Yes, there are school board representation and staff representation along with Richmond Olympic Oval.
I appreciate that. Thanks for clarifying that. And yeah, if I could get further, or we could get further information on that, just a summary of that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay.
My next point, if I may, through the chair, I just like to make a few comments, some highlights, some things I really support in the report. I've seen the new signage that's gone up on tennis courts and other facilities to let people know what the intended use is of that city space. I think it's very clear. It's nice we have phone numbers that people can call when they see improper use, so they don't have to confront users of it in appropriate ways. I also appreciate staff's work on the dealing with conflict, because some of our spaces get used by many groups and they compete for it, and they need a mediator like the city to clearly do the job we have been doing. So thanks for that. So obviously the strategy is working there. The area I'd like to now speak to, if I may, through the chair, is one of the focus areas that I have a lot of concern about. It's the last area I'll talk about today. It's focus area number 5. It's about connectedness to nature. There's a number of places in our package, the report and the attachment document, where it's mentioned. You don't have to go to them all right now, but it's first listed in the report on page 80 as one of the 7 focus areas. In there, just a little tagline with it is that Richmond residents enjoy opportunities to connect with nature. On page 84, it has the half a page dedicated to it and includes a key highlight there. And then if you go into the actual the attachment, the strategy update, it's on page 135, 136, 137. And so my concern is that this update is perhaps updating a lack of progress in the strategy is what I'm feeling, and what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from other residents. I'm really familiar with the Nature Park Boardwalk. I've worked there, volunteered there, been involved with it forever, and I know the new park, that's the playground that's been established with natural wood features, and totally think that's awesome. And the city had a big role in helping fund that project, so that's great. And on page 137, the preschooler nature schools that are high demand and are just like really great that we're able to promote that and provide space for it, and heritage building connections to it. So great. But where I think I'm seeing the biggest where we're missing the mark here is we're not there's nothing in the strategy that involves protecting natural recreation areas or adding to our network. Councillor Steves mentioned earlier about trails into the wetland areas, and I know some elementary schools like Steves Elementary, they have places that they can go with their classes, but there's not a lot of new ones. And just today I drove past Audlinwood on Alderbridge Way, and they're ripping up all the vegetation along Alderbridge Way, and I think of what we're replacing it with. This is clearly a recreational space. It's a trail that's going to be for bikes, wheelchairs, strollers, walkers, runners, everything on a paved asphalt trail that is pretty much right up to the road with very little vegetation, so the sound barrier, the smell, pollution barrier is gone. And if you've ever walked with kids, when there's no barrier, it's a very different walk. The kid's not going to walk around and poke and interact. They're going to be like fearful of cars and death on one side and want to just get straight to the other end of the trail as their focus and not connect with nature. I did hear from staff that Audlinwood is not a park, so it doesn't fit into perhaps this strategy. But that's what I think is missing in the on page 154. It talks about progress on priority areas for all the focus areas. Well, on that page, it doesn't list what I feel are the priorities, which would be to preserve natural areas where recreation is already occurring, as opposed to removing them, because that's what we're doing with Audlinwood, and we don't get opportunities to have things like this We don't have other city land where we want to carve into the edge of them and create edge effects. Because every time you do a trail, you impact it. Sure, it opens it up for recreation, but there's so little of this left. So those are my comments. If staff can provide comments now in regards to that, I'm contemplating asking for this to be referred back so that there can be more priority areas suggested. And I know then we'd have to open up the old strategy, and this is just an update. I get it. But I would like more update on what can be done because the trend is going in the wrong way. Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, this was to give an update on the priority areas and the specific action items that were endorsed by Council 2.5 years ago. And I certainly don't want to negate the importance of some of the opportunities that you're suggesting. I would just suggest that those are addressed in other strategies in a better way. So I would look to our parks and open space strategy, where it talks about the construction or the design of infrastructure, and Todd may have additional information to add to that. This strategy is really about the programs and services that are implemented to animate those spaces once built. So this strategy really had a different focus, and I think that the items that you highlight are important but addressed in other strategies.
If I can add to that, yes, the parks items identified here today really are around our programming. As Elizabeth noted, our Parks and Open Space strategy clearly is a much better place to highlight these items and concerns. That is coming forward next year in 2022 for an update and revision, and so we can clearly identify those at that time.
If I could add to that, we've got a couple of referrals that Todd and his staff are working on. One is to finally get Terra Nova Slough opened up for fish and wildlife. And I think we gave them a referral to the possibility of a boardwalk over part of the marsh at Terra Nova. The original plan was to put one down around Williams Road, but we don't own that. We do own the what used to be the Grower lands at Westminster Highway. I think there's a pending referral on that from a long time ago. And the one I intend to bring back is from 1982 when we planted an estuarium at Gary Point Park. And we're looking at having basically trails along the dike, trails out where the co-op slough was, and canoeing and kayaking in the marsh where it's safe from the river, and interpretive aquariums and interpretation centers, the whole bit in terms of sturgeon banks. And we started on that around 1969 or so, and I've got a fair amount of material accumulated on it. We actually approved it in 1982, but it never happened. So I think that these are things that we'll be able to bring back, but it doesn't really affect this report. This just tells us where we are now, and we can go and look and say, hey, here's the gaps, and let's start filling them. Just the way we discussed with the previous reports. We now know where the gaps are. Without these reports, we haven't got a clue what the gaps are. We're just sort of fumbling around in the wilderness, so not to speak. Anyway, any further questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Just to thank staff for calming me down a little bit, and Councillor Steeves for adding that in as well. The one or two words, I guess, that are in the report that I do still want to get some response on is on the page 154. The last two words on the page are in progress. So I'd like to know, and it doesn't have to be right now. It can be, and I'd probably like a more thorough set of details, but what is in progress when it comes to providing an increased number of guided nature and conservation science educational options? I am the liaison for the Richmond Nature Park Society. I used to deliver those programs as well, so I'm familiar with what they're doing. But do we have any other in progress that would be captured in the programming of this strategy? Thanks.
We would be able, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we would be able to come back with additional information on that.
Okay, any further discussion?
Move the recommendation.
It's been moved, it's seconded. All those in favor? Contrary? Carried. Michael's contrary? Okay. Okay, that leads us on to, and we know, Michael, you have a problem with being contrary on these, and I should tell you right now, it doesn't show in the records, unfortunately, why you're contrary. You're contrary because you want it to go further than this, not that you're opposed to it. And I think you're going to have some explaining to do when people read the minutes of these meetings in the future.
Yeah,
so
and I actually voted for this one, but,
you
but I
did?
appreciate the clarification because I am aware that I do want more out of some reports. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, your hand was still up, so you were for it. Oh, that's great. Thanks very much. Okay, next is the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We just have one. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. To the Chair, an update for Halloween this Sunday, October 31st. As everybody in the memo provided information, the fireworks this year have been canceled, the various ones around the community and at Miniru, and that is related to COVID. There are a variety of activities happening in the community, within the community centers over the weekend, the Halloween weekend. And then also we have been working with Richmond Fire Rescue, Richmond RCMP, Richmond School District bylaws on coordinating our response for Sunday, October 31st, and we will also have vehicles out on the 31st monitoring our various park and facilities. Thank you.
Okay, and that's it? No other reports?
Nope.
Okay, Linda, okay, Carol and Linda have questions. Carol.
Yeah. Hi, thank you very much, Councillor Steves. I'm not sure who was speaking on the line. It's not coming up on my computer screen. Who was just speaking? Staff member?
That was great.
Mike? Yeah.
Mike? Okay, Mike, is it possible to get an update for people on what the guidelines are for giving out Halloween candy? I know last year I have a big display every year that I put up, and I just put the candy out on tables so people could take individually with tongs. Is there any other further guidelines that the people in Richmond need to know?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, it's Greg Wheeler. Sorry about that if I wasn't clear earlier, Councillor Day. No, I'm not aware of any guidelines, in particular with regards to handing out candy for Halloween evening.
Okay, well, we'll figure it out. Thank you.
Yeah.
Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe my question would go to Greg Wheeler. Is there any another update about the user group allocation on the turf field? Has that been resolved?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, we're working hard on that this afternoon. I spent most of the afternoon liaising with a couple of the soccer groups to resolve some of the smaller issues, and it is very much a work in progress. And further meetings tomorrow that were scheduled this afternoon to resolve some of these outstanding issues. So it is priority one.
Thank you for that. So do you envision that there's going to be a change policy or anything that will come back to us in a report, or that you need to work these things out more on the on the guideline level?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, I think we're working our way through the new allocation policy and the accompanying administrative procedure. We have some new players at the table as it relates to some of the soccer groups, so it is working our way through that also. So hopefully, I'm confident that we will be able to resolve this season very shortly, and that going forward we will be able to work with each of the groups to figure it out.
Thanks very much.
Okay, that concludes the open council meetings. Someone like to move adjourn?
Move adjournment.
All those in favor? Contrary?